A lot of comments are very interesting, and a lot are they veer in the direction of this sort of tribalist thing. If you criticise one, you can't criticise the other. You can't blame Nigel Farage for Brexit, no matter how much you may want to. You can't blame Farage for Brexit. He was not in power. You can blame the Labour Party, you can blame the Conservative Party, but you can't blame Farage. You can identify Farage as an influence, malign or otherwise, and a major influence. But there's too much tribalism in YouTube. To blame one party is not to exonerate the other. And to say none of the above is to offer no solution at all. I am free with my solutions. In the same way as I am free with my criticisms, most solutions do not involve dependence on the current crop of household named politicians who have clawed their way to the top of the dung heap. Farage is a curious political animal. He embodies a contradiction, an anti-establishment figure who is deeply embedded in the establishment, a working-class champion who has never known economic precarity, a British nationalist who spends more time in Washington and Florida than in Wigan or Wakefield. And this contradiction is the essence of his appeal. He reminds me very much of people like Mosley. He presents himself as an outsider despite being one of the most enduring figures in British politics in the centre over the last quarter century. Paul Novak of the TUC has described him as a political fraud, a private equity-loving NHS privatising Putin apologist. And while this might sound like a typical invective hurled at Farage from his opponents, there is a kernel of undeniable truth in the charge sheet. His record shows a consistent pattern of opposing workers' rights, supporting deregulation, advocating for an insurance-based NHS, positions that in any other context might make him unelectable in a country with strong public attachment to the welfare state. But the problem is this: denouncing Farage as a villain is not enough. He thrives on being a villain. He weaponizes attacks against him as proof that he's shaking up a corrupt, complacent elite. I'm not shallow. It takes every criticism as a badge of honour for Farage, every rebuke as a sign of his righteousness. This sort of martyr complex. The left has spent years shouting about Farage's hypocrisy, and yet his support keeps growing. Why? Because Farage has correctly identified something his opponents refuse to acknowledge. People are tired of the political class, and the more he can frame himself as their enemy, the more he wins. Reform UK, under his leadership, presents a serious electoral threat. The latest polling suggests the party could gain between 76 and 169 seats in a general election, drawing support from both Labour and the Conservatives. And this isn't just a revolt of the Tory right, but a wider insurrection against a political system that has failed to deliver on its promises. The voters are not monolithic. Many are simply people who feel let down by stagnating wages, declining public services, and a political class that seems detached from their concerns. Crucially, Farage is not merely a symptom of discontent, he is actively exploiting it. His party's campaign strategy is not reliant on crude anti-immigration messaging alone. Reform UK is focusing on hyper-local issues: potholes, crime, decaying high streets. Their activists are present in community Facebook groups, at football matches, local football matches, on the ground in a way that mainstream parties have neglected recently. This is grassroots insurgency, not merely online bluster. And yet it hasn't translated into the mechanics that will push the Reform Party into the front in the first-past-the-post system. Farage also benefits from the broader political landscape, of course. The Conservatives are in free fall, with Kemi Badenoch standing in for a leader. Her brand of stupidity is astonishing, even among the experienced welter of elite politicians in Britain that we've grown used to. You know, brace, it's going to be a disaster. I'd make everything hard. She creates her own vacuum in a world which is filled with vacuums. It's extraordinary how she fails to articulate an alternative beyond managerial competence. It creates a vacuum, and Farage, like all good populists, is adept at filling vacuums. He doesn't need to have a fully fleshed out policy. He only needs to pose as an antidote to a failing system. He only needs to point out the failures. The left and the centre cannot simply dismiss Farage now because he has political credibility. He is in the House of Commons. He can command the House of Commons in a way that almost no one else can. Just look back at yesterday where he reduced the House of Commons to a laughingstock, literally. Literally. He stopped Prime Minister's questions and presided over the giggling and the laughing like some sort of Max Miller. It was shocking. If they want to defeat him, if the left or the right want to defeat him, they must engage with the grievances that drive his popularity. That means offering tangible solutions to economic insecurity, making the case for public services in a way that resonates with people's daily lives, and crucially, understanding that simply demonising Farage's supporters as backward or xenophobic will only push them further into his arms. I think we've gone beyond the point where we can call for public service to be honest. I was bashing my head against a local public service the last few days to the extent that I'm exhausted. And trying to get evidence, trying to prove that something is deceitful when you know it is. It's a game, and when the local services hold all the chips, it's very difficult to play that game as a member of the public. And they've got used to playing that game. They've got used to that power, that control. And the only way to move forward is for them to cede some of that power. And that's, of course, that leaves them in an extremely precarious position. I'm not really talking about the elected politicians here. I'm talking about the cronies, the bureaucrats who control the system. And they are secure, while the ordinary people are not. And I find it extraordinary that a county council, which is so far removed from the local town, should be dictating local issues, and at the same time avoiding its responsibility to keep us safe. I've been pushed over twice. I've slipped on leaves once. I'm in pain, and yet the council has done nothing to sort out bicycles going up and down the pavement. I stopped a bicyclist the other day, and I held my arms open and said, "What?" And he stopped just past me and turned around. "What's the matter?" I said, "It's a pavement. That's the road." He said, "There are cars on the road." And you think, well, if there isn't proper education, if there isn't proper signage, then it is like an invitation for people to use the pavement as a bicycle track. And if you're lucky, they'll use their bell as they come careering towards you. And if you're agile enough, you might be able to get out of the way. We need solutions, and we need to start tidying up our own house. Farage is not invincible. But while the house is in such a mess, while the political reality on our doorstep and in Westminster is such a cesspit of cronies, the people we see and the people we don't see, but we know it. While that is the case, Farage and people like Farage will thrive, but he's not invincible. His party is still an untested electoral force, and his own record is full of inconsistencies and contradictions that can be exposed. But this will not happen through moral outrage alone. The fight against Reform UK will not be won with Twitter threads, Guardian op-eds or denunciations from union leaders. It will be won by out-competing them in places where they are making gains, by listening, engaging and offering something better. And people are saying in the comment section, well, what is your solution? What is better than what we've got at the moment? And the problem is there aren't any compelling individuals in Parliament, in local government, who could take on the Farages. Only Farage is there. And so we wait for... Why do we have such dull indolence in power? Because the interesting people are weeded out. The charismatic, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party is terrified of charisma. Why? Because they know, as we know, that charisma will make its way to the top of this heap of inadequacy. Elect somebody with a little bit of personality, elect somebody with name recognition, and they'll be pushing the door to number 10 quicker than you can say boo to a goose. The choice is simple. Either let Farage's movement solidify into a genuine force in British politics, or confront him with an alternative that speaks to people's frustrations in a way that's constructive, not just condemning. Because for all his bombast, for all his political theatre, Farage is filling a void left by others' failure. He's filling a void left by the Conservative and the Labour Party and the Lib Dems and the Greens, yes, even the Greens, who fail to put forward people with character, who fail to put forward people with conviction, who fail to put forward people who can engage with an audience. Instead, you've got Kemi Badenoch arming herself with rhetoric saying, I'd make it harder. Well, that doesn't get us anywhere, does it? And Keir Starmer with his vocal advisor. Who cares about a vocal advisor? Who cares what he's doing with a vocal advisor? There are times when it's really good to have vocal advice. And I was listening yesterday to a wonderful podcast about Charlie Stemp. If you haven't come across Charlie Stemp, you need to. He was Bert in Mary Poppins. He was in Half a Sixpence. He did a stint in the States in Hello Dolly. He's been in Panto at the Palladium, and the Gershwin Show, and he is a stupendous performer. But he wasn't trained as a singer, and he sorted out his notes with a really good vocal coach, and he can hold a song, and he can put forward the story that the song is presenting. And my own impression is that Starmer, if he's had time with a vocal coach, which I would recommend highly, I'd recommend that Kemi Badenoch does it as well, because her vocals are awful. But Starmer, whoever he has engaged with as a vocal coach, isn't any good, because he doesn't tell a story. Both Starmer and Badenoch look as if they are reciting somebody else's words, and they don't engage. And it doesn't matter how good or how efficient your voice is. Starmer always sounds as if he's shouting. And I get the impression that his voice is very tired. And he needs to find a way to save that energy and to focus the energy so that there's one point in Prime Minister's questions yesterday where I thought, I can just hear a real voice there. But it didn't last long. Kemi Badenoch, I just hear a whine. It's like listening to a combine harvester on a bad day. And it means nothing. There is no difference. This lowering of the voice to try and sound serious is just like a change of gear. And it's not interesting. So as I say, whoever Starmer employed as a vocal coach was useless. And he needs to find somebody who can actually do the job. And if she was given some sort of clearance during COVID, then yes, that was inappropriate because she wasn't any good. She wasn't doing her job. And she may have been giving him confidence in some other way, but she wasn't improving his voice, and it needs improvement. And given the fact that a politician is all about public speaking, I find it extraordinary that there are so few who can do it. Rory Stewart was one, Jacob Rees-Mogg another. When she was any good, Nadine Dorries was another, bizarrely. And I remember her standing in Parliament before she became a minister, talking about her commitment to meeting her constituents. And it was a brilliant speech. And yet when she became a minister, she became absent from her constituency. The lure of power. And she became almost incoherent in interviews. There was one interview where she was standing in the lobby in the House of Commons, in the central lobby in Westminster, and it was a pathetic excuse for power. It was embarrassing. Maybe she was tired, but politicians today have a short shelf life, and if they're not given the tools to present their personality, then we shouldn't be surprised that someone like Farage edges in and looks like the only choice. We need vocal coaches in Westminster because we need to be able to hear the quality of the people in power. Because at the moment, let you in on the reality, there is no quality. So because of all his bombast, for all his political theatre, Farage is filling this void left by other people's failure. The question is whether anyone else is willing to step up and fill it first. The question is whether anyone else has got the voice to fill that void. Doesn't take much, does it? Doesn't take much to be heard in a vacuum or in an echo chamber. In a chamber, doesn't take much to fill an empty room. But if someone doesn't, Farage will.